Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and this is your place to learn how to use the applied science of storytelling to bewitch your audiences. I mean, after all, you have to understand the magic if you're going to cast a spell. Am I right or what? Today, I have an expert on place-based storytelling for you who will show you how to make your brand, sales, and marketing stories more compelling by centering your stories on a time and a place. Chris Miller is the Corporate Communications Manager at Visit Phoenix, the nonprofit organization that promotes the greater Phoenix area, the fifth largest city in the country, as a travel destination and meeting venue. Tourism generates an estimated annual revenue of over $12.9 billion for the metropolitan area. But you don't have to be in the destination business to benefit from your place-based storytelling. Chris is here to show you how. Last week found Michelle and I running around Texas. We started first by presenting a Business of Story training at AMBA, which stands for the Association Member Benefits and Insurance Agency. I'd like to give a big thank you to Bo Carr and John Green for the opportunity to work with your 75 AMBA member associations in attendance on how to use the ABT framework to craft more clear, concise, and compelling communications. It was a great time. But I got to tell you, Michelle and I suffered from one of my unforced error when I booked our travel. You see, we flew Southwest Airlines into Hobby Airport in Houston. I was thinking there was only one airport in Houston. I was wrong. Well, while we were waiting for our bags, I punched in the Hyatt Regency in Conroe, Texas, which is a little bit northwest of Houston, and I punched that into my Waze app. What? To my surprise, we had another 90-minute drive to our destination ahead of us, which actually took more like over 2 hours in rush hour traffic as we clawed our way to my gig. I didn't know Bush Airport was just 30 minutes away from where I was presenting at the conference. Dope. That was my problem. So the next afternoon, following my AMBA workshop, Michelle and I drove like 2.5 hours to Austin. But it seemed like it took 2 of those hours just to escape the surly bonds of the Houston traffic congestion gravity. See my little Houston aerospace connection there? Anyways, we stayed with our son Parker and his wife Jackie in McKinney Falls outside of Austin. I produced another Business of Story mastery course the next day for an eclectic network of people from a variety of businesses, including Shell Energy, Southern Methodist University, Gensler, Andromeda Entertainment, and even LA Paws Cat Grooming. Like I said, a rather eclectic group of folks, and we had a blast. Then after the session, we spent the next several days exploring Austin, nibbling at food trucks, laughing at the Creek and Cave Comedy Club. Highly recommend that place. We bar hopped along 6th Street, and we had an amazing breakfast at Epicure before Parker and I raced go-karts on the track out at the Circuit of America's F1 Raceway. You know, we raced 3 heats, and I had a lousy car in the first 2 heats, but then I got the fast car in the last heat, and I actually won. So I guess I got my participation trophy. But you know, during our stay, I ended up posting like 15 pics of all the different things we did in Austin, and each one got their own story. And I told those place-based stories differently depending on which channel I was using, from Instagram to LinkedIn to Facebook. So the question is, which story would you rather hear and actually be a participant in? Our journey through gridlocked Houston, or the many adventures we experienced in Austin? That's why I'm excited to explore place-based storytelling today with Chris Miller. He has spent the last 15 years turning places into stories, and Phoenix is his magnum opus, as he calls it. He doesn't just tell stories, he spins the kind of narratives that make you want to pack your bags and book a flight. Chris has the enviable job of showcasing a city that defies expectations, whether he's pulling back the curtain on Phoenix's explosive sports tourism scene, spotlighting its world-class events, or dishing on the culinary gems hidden in the Sonoran Desert. But Chris doesn't just rely on the single telling of one story. Instead, he takes that story and shares it through multiple channels in different ways.
If you have one story, you have 5 layers to utility, right? What utility am I looking for here? The desert made me do it. That's going to go out on YouTube. That's going to be out in our airport at Sky Harbor. You're going to see all kinds of content out and about. That same desert made me do it piece for LinkedIn. If we put something out on LinkedIn and we're talking to our peers in our profession, right? We're going to lean more into that advocacy role. Yeah, the desert made me do it, but why? And then you can really break apart and dive into and dissect the power of travel and tourism, the economic impact, things like that. So we're really bolstering our advocacy side of things to say, hey, yeah, these are all very, very particular stories that relate back to consumer, leisure travelers, etc. But there's also that business side, that meetings and convention side, that advocacy side. It's kind of a plug and play based on what you need and what you want out of that particular story. You can get so many miles out of that same story in a lot of different facets.
With a professional history as varied as the city he now represents, Chris has told stories for chief medical officers and chief nursing officers, CEOs, an entire nursing workforce, a medical group with nearly 5,000 physicians, and a state's worth of children and public health challenges. Now he's laser focused on showing the world why Phoenix is more than just a sunny destination. It's a place where possibilities and stories collide. Simply put, Chris puts place at the heart of everything he does. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Park, thanks for having me.
This is awesome. We've had a chance to work together over the years, most recently working with Visit Phoenix and your team there over a very hot summer in Phoenix, Arizona. But it was great running into you again there, and it's just a pleasure working with your entire team. Chris, how did you get into storytelling in your career?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Going back to where things started, you could probably say that I took the scenic route into my career. I started undergraduate in my studies there a little bit later in life, a little bit later than the norm. But that purpose had journey from the start, or the journey had purpose from the start, I'd say. At that time, right when I started my undergraduate endeavors, I was in Detroit and I was helping my mother navigate the complexities of healthcare and social services as she faced some really serious health challenges. And that experience really opened my eyes to how deeply intertwined place, health, and people really are, and how they communicate with each other and how they impact each other. And that was right around the time the Affordable Care Act was to talk to the town. We were about a year into Barack Obama's first presidency there. So fall of 2009, right around this time in 2009. That inspired me to pursue a really new and unique undergrad program that they offered at the University of Michigan at that time, which was health policy. It's a hybrid of public health and public policy. There's usually there you can't find both of those together in a lot of undergraduate programs. You can usually find that once you get into your graduate work. So that was really unique to me. After that, my first gig after college, I started a very small healthcare nonprofit in Detroit. And what we did there is what we build. We trying to figure out an easy way to say this without going too far into it because it's a really really complex and unique challenge. We would build what would be referred to as a medical home for children that came from more transient families and low income families that didn't really have an established pediatrician. So that job saw a lot of social work, a lot of communication, and some program management. And that really shaped my approach to storytelling early on and really cut my teeth there because and the time I was there, I probably worked with 300 or 400 different families, all with very different but very similar situations, right? Case by case basis. From there, I went up to the state capitol in Lansing and really dove into my public health work in HIV prevention, maternal and infant health care, and early childhood education. And that was a really special experience for me to work on behalf of 83 distinct counties. It's not like Arizona. We don't have anywhere near 83 counties. So, again, very similar but very different county to county, all driven with the goal of better health outcomes. And then finished up my graduate work in public admin in Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids. Go Lakers! You can imagine very place-based studies there. That was urban and regional policy and planning for me. And then by the end of 2019, that's what really got me here to the Sonoran Desert. I decided I wanted to trade the snow for the saguaro cacti, and I landed here just in time to join Banner Health's corporate communications team, where I first actually got a chance to connect with you. And that was right as COVID hit. And that saw me communicate on behalf of an entire nursing workforce, an entire medical group with a few thousand physicians, a really large HR workforce, and a lot of organizational programming that was focused around wellness, cultivating happiness in medicine, appreciative inquiry, and wellness in nursing, to name a few. And ultimately, that brought me to visit Phoenix, where I get to tell the story of the fifth largest city in the country and how our evolution and growth continue. We continue to be a full on kaleidoscope of relevance, and we're bringing the world to our doorstep day by day.
Yeah. So your work, your journey through healthcare and healthcare communications was really spawned by you and your brother taking care of your mother, right? And just seeing the
Correct.
gaps in the system and how
Yeah.
you could help her get through and then help others not have
Right.
the same entangled challenges you had with your mom.
Exactly, that's right. And I mean, the world of healthcare is complex anywhere you go. But when you take a look at very specific cities and regions in the country, talking about when we think about place, Detroit has some very specific health disparities, ones that you wouldn't typically put at the top of your list. There's plenty of the ones that you hear about, you read about, you see the research about, listen to podcasts about. But the peculiarities of taking care of someone that is post career in their mid to late 50s that has a lot of things going on all at once made it pretty difficult. And I'm glad I had that experience. I feel like a lot of people go through similar things like that, but it really helped shape my perception of, hey, place is a predictor of health and health is a predictor of place. And those things work off each other, and communication lies right in the middle of those things. And all too often the communication is not very sharp, I guess.
Hmm.
We can do so much as receivers of that healthcare and receivers of those benefits, but you can advocate as much as you can, but it takes a really long time and it takes a lot of patience.
Yeah. And where did you come across this idea of place-based storytelling?
So, place based storytelling, I thought about this. It was my capstone project. This is a few years after I started the journey with my mother and kind of figuring out her situation there for her. Our capstone project in our health policy program was taking a look at like city planning and how city planning is a predictor of health, is a predictor of, equity, income, education, things like that. And we did a little case study on Ithaca, New York. A smaller town. Some people may know the name, they might recognize it. They have a big university presence there, college presence there, but they had some serious challenges with their health, their citizens, and they couldn't figure it out. And that really got me thinking about what can I do for the place that I'm in, knowing that I am in Metro Detroit. We have a reputation. That city, everybody has an opinion on Detroit. It seems like a lot of people have, opinions on places they've never been. We can get into that, the challenge of place-based storytelling a little later. But it got me thinking, what can I do to improve place and improve health on the behalf of the people that live here? To me, it starts, you don't get a chance to pick who your parents are, pick what your position is in this world when you're a child. So I figured I should start there. And that's how I got into that initial nonprofit work in children's healthcare.
Gotcha. And how are you now using place-based storytelling with Visit Phoenix? Because it's kind of seems like a bit of a leap to go from all of your healthcare background into tourism.
Yeah, it's a interesting segue, right? I always like a new challenge, and it's one of those things where it just kind of sequenced out into different facets of healthcare into this completely new thing, tourism. Visit Phoenix, a convention and visitors bureau, right? When I think about storytelling in place, it's not about just facts or figures. It's about how things transcend the mere sharing of information. It transforms places into experiences, and those experiences into lasting memories. All those things are part and parcel of somebody's health experience too. But a little bit of a lighter side when we're talking about bringing people to Phoenix, right? A little bit different. I figured, okay, I've worked in a lot of healthcare roles that are, I would say, they have a certain heaviness to them, right? Said, you know what? I think that I can tell the story of place. I had been telling the story of place for nearly nearly 10 years at that point when I took a look at Visit Phoenix, and I said, you know what? I think I want to try this in a different lens, and that's where I'm at now. That's why for me, place is the one big thing. When you can harness the story of place, you can turn it from a dot on a map into an emotional landscape that people want to be a part of, right? So it's not just a destination; it's an emotion, a feeling, a living, breathing story. When they come to Phoenix, they're not just visiting, they're feeling something, they're connecting.
Give us an example of one of your place-based stories for Visit Phoenix.
The one that we're working on right now that I'm the most excited about. I'm a big sports guy. We've kind of dubbed ourselves Championship Valley. As an Arizonan, you've seen all the things that continue to come in the last couple of years. 2023, we had Super Bowl. This year, we had the NCAA men's and women's Final Four. We had the WNBA All Star Game. In 2026, we have the women's NCAA Final Four and the NBA All Star Game. That's in a window of 4 years. One place getting all of those mega events says a lot about the city that you're in, your ability to execute those heavy lifts like that. And it helps with, putting together an identity for a city. Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the country. Not everybody might know that, right? A lot of people probably have perceptions about Phoenix, about the Sonoran Desert. They think about the climate. They think about, you know, the saguaro cactuses, things like that. They think about the Old West epoch, all of those
Hmm.
things. That's more or less it's been its identity for a very long time, right? But it's been a very fast growing city. And I would say, in the last 30 years that identity has changed quite a bit. Though I've only been here for 5 years, I've gotten a lot of anecdotal evidence from my colleagues at work, my in-laws, people that have been in Phoenix for some time, and the evolution is just wild to think about in the span of like 20 years. Despite its rapid growth, Phoenix has kind of been underestimated, more or less. They overlook it, they associate it with, climate, but they forget the culture and the idea that we have all of these sports and we have 300 days of sun a year. We have a very, very, very particular way that we do things here. And this perception is part of, kind of the problem. How do we change that story? How do we tell the world that Phoenix is more than just a backdrop, for the
Hmm.
desert expanse? Here we are, Championship Valley. You name it, we have it.
So, what are the elements that go into that Championship Valley place based story? Because I want our listeners who are not in tourism, because tourism obviously seems like a natural place for this kind of storytelling. But I'd like to hear those elements. And then, even if you could connect the concepts behind those elements of how maybe a B2B might use place based storytelling or a business to consumer might use it.
When I think about what we've had and what we've seen so far, Super Bowls, NCAA's, just like I mentioned, at this point in time, in 2024, we're not a city struggling for recognition, but we've carved out a unique identity on top of some other things that have helped our identity. We have a couple layers of that identity, and we're doing this on a global stage. We're not just hosting these mega events; they're great to have. They bring in droves of people. Economic development is undeniable, right? But we're shaping the conversation around the importance of sports in our culture and even societal issues like gender equality through women's sports. If I'm not mistaken, this WNBA All Star game that we just had, I believe that it was the first full sellout of any WNBA All Star game. It was the third
Hmm.
time that we've had it in Phoenix, but that just shows the magnetism of sports to place. And 85% of the folks that attended that All Star game were from out of town markets, which says a lot. A lot of representation from Chicago, Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles. That says everything. They're coming here to see the WNBA. There's a shift in perception. We're at a big inflection point with the city and with sports as a whole. Storytelling can shift perceptions and raise visibility in a crowded marketplace at the very baseline.
So when you're okay, you're talking about that play space, letting people know that Arizona is more than cactus and
Yeah,
cow skulls and scorpions and sun, and we've got all these other
sure,
things. Not to mention the tech industry that is booming out here in the chip
absolutely.
manufacturing and so forth. Tourism is obviously golf and the like is always at the top of people's minds, but again, so you've got a really vibrant place to be able to tell a place-based story. What about a B2B brand that is selling services? Is there any way that they can work this kind of idea of place-based storytelling into their marketing?
Something that I always think about, and I think this is something that if you take what I will tell you here shortly and apply it to whatever that mission, that culture, that vision of a particular business is, I feel like they can probably deconstruct that or reconstruct that and put it onto whatever they're looking to gain, whatever however they're looking to evolve. I feel like if you ask 100 people to share an important lesson they learned in life, you're going to get 100 different answers, right? Those lessons are going to differ, but the one common thread is place, where they learned it, how it shaped them, right? It has everything to do with their story. We underestimate the role that place plays in shaping our lives and identities. It's not just a backdrop, it's a character in the narrative. And leaning into that place where that business is, that's a whole story in itself. It might be a rock that's not been turned over quite yet, but it's there. People think about who you are, but where you are too.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it. Now that you've defined that for me, I'd think about our five, step process of the five primal elements of a short story for big impact that starts with a timestamp. When did this
Hmm.
story happen, right? And stories are always about a moment in time. They're really about a
Right.
scene when something happens, something changes, something transforms. And we always like to say, start with your five primal elements of a short story, a timestamp to help trigger that limbic brain that says, oh, something must have happened because Park is telling me as specifically as possible when this event happened. So I better pay
Right.
attention. And then we follow that with a location stamp. Where did it happen? Because we believe that that really helps fire up the theater of the mind. So not only have we just first triggered that limbic brain and giving it a timestamp, but now a location stamp. So it could have been, the fall or October 13th in up here, northern Arizona and
Yep.
Flagstaff. The first morning of snow we got is when that phone call came in. And so now
Exactly.
people are picturing, well, wait, what happened? What are you doing in Flagstaff? It's snowing in Arizona? What? And that plays to it, doesn't it?
Right, and that's I think I mean, applicable to B2B to a destination marketing organization, whether it's Phoenix, whether it's Orlando, whether it's Baltimore, right? I feel like for me the essence of that simplicity in storytelling, right? Those five pieces of storytelling is really that delicate dance between the familiar and the ambiguous. You want to
Mm-hmm.
give them set that up with something that's familiar. Okay, I got it. I understand that. I've been there, or I've seen it. I've heard it, but you want to double down on that following thought, that subsequent thought of, wait a minute, what do you mean? That's how I feel about telling the story of places. Something that I like to say and we like to use in some of our content is ours to share and a place for all to keep, right? So what does that mean? Ours to share. If I'm from Stroudsburg and I've never been to Phoenix, right? And I see that ours to share, okay, that means I'm welcome. That sounds like a good place. I want to go check that out. Ours to share seems like something that is peaceful, it's welcoming, etc. But what does a place for all to keep mean? That could be anything, right? That could be tangible, that could be emotional, that could be something in your heart. It could be a million things all at once. So, to me, that defines kind of our magnetism of Phoenix, and that's something that I really lean into, and that's something that I think a lot of people do feel about Phoenix. They can always take something with them, and it might have them coming back. We make people feel something when they come here, and the emotional connection builds that real narrative for them to come back time and time again. Whether they're bringing their business here, starting a business here, or just moving here for good. You know, it's all intertwined in the story of place. I feel like when somebody hops on a plane, boards a train, or gets in the car, they bring their whole life with them. They have a million reasons for being anywhere. Phoenix, or that business aspect, that B2B, Phoenix is every one of those reasons, whether they know it or not. They just might not know it yet until they get here, right? That balancing that familiar and that ambiguous piece, I think really hones in on telling the story of place. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but you can still keep it very simple.
When I ran our ad agency down there, Park and Co., for the 20 years we ran it, 10 of those years I was representing Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. And we
Mm,
did all of their work, internal,
yeah,
external. That's back in the day when you had one agency.
yeah,
And one agency did it all, and it was great fun. And one of the things that we're actually two agencies. We were the ad agency, but we were also working with a very good PR firm because we did do public relations. And
yeah,
together we came up with working with the staff there about this idea of the problem we were solving, Chris, was that people were flying into Las Vegas and LA and even as far east as Dallas and then driving into Phoenix and driving into Arizona. They just didn't realize they could take British Airways and fly directly into
yeah.
Phoenix. And
Okay,
so
yeah,
we created a campaign called See It From the Heart. And we used all of the iconic imagery that Europeans really relate to Arizona with
right,
cowboys and Native Americans and beautiful sunsets in the Grand Canyon. And we created these ads and they really were full page, four color. They looked like business stories, and we placed them in business magazines throughout Europe because the idea was to get those European business travelers to fly directly into Phoenix. And
yeah,
therefore, you're coming to Phoenix, you want to see the Southwest, see it from the heart, Phoenix, Arizona. So place played, of course, a very big role in that particular campaign. And it's not something I'd really thought that much about until now when you mentioned this whole idea of place-based storytelling.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's I mean it's to me it's an ever changing thing. There's so many and you think about solving that problem of place or the problem of story, whatever it might be, Sky Harbor, Phoenix, you name it. I think it's an opportunity. It can present itself as a problem, but it's an opportunity. I think more than anything, one visitor, 100 experiences. Right
Hmm.
to your point, you want to use that imagery that connects somebody from across the pond. You want to connect them and draw them in with that. But if you ask that visitor that came to Phoenix from, Blackpool about their trip, you're going to hear things about culture, cuisine, nightlife, nature, history. One city has infinite interpretations depending on the traveler, right? And storytelling can struggle to capture such multitudes in a single thread, but that is not a bad thing. So it's just kind of picking that and layering that and sequencing that, right?
Hmm.
Sky Harbor has thousands of stories to tell. It's just when and where and how.
Yeah. Well, and you with Visit Phoenix has thousands of stories to
Yeah.
tell. What is kind of your story delivery strategy? Where do you do, social, digital? I mean, how are you telling your stories?
I mean, gosh, we have a full bore communications team that we have myself, Sarah, our communications director, we have Michael, our media relations coordinator, we have Lily, our marketing and media relations coordinator, and then we have our media relations manager, Emma. So you think about communications and media relations. All these people that want to come and see Phoenix, whether they're influencers, they're journalists, etc., they work with our media relations. We build those itineraries, we get them on the ground, and then on the other side of that, Phoenix gets featured in New York Times, Condé Nast Traveler, the Wall Street Journal, you name it. So that's a big anchor of what we do. We also have a wonderful, incredibly impactful marketing team that dives into all of these different stories. So our marketing campaign right now, The Desert Made Me Do It. You can see that, check that out. Very visual, but very simple tagline, right? We do just about anything. Social media,
Hmm.
email, LinkedIn is a big one for our folks, in the DMO world and in the travel and tourism world, the aviation world, you name it. But just about anything, you name it, we are on it, and we're here to talk about, why Phoenix.
And how do you use these different channels differently, to try to leverage the strength of any particular channel to tell maybe the same story? Maybe you've got that one story down and you want to tell it on YouTube. You also want to tell it
Yeah.
on Instagram. You're also going to send it out as a press release potentially.
Sure. Yeah. So with that, I think if you have one story, you have five layers to utility, right? What utility am I looking for here? The desert made me do it. That's going to go out on YouTube. That's going to be out in our airport at Sky Harbor. You're going to see all kinds of content out and about. That same desert made me do it piece for LinkedIn. If we put something out on LinkedIn and we're talking to our peers in our profession, right? We're going to lean more into that advocacy role. Yeah, the desert made me do it, but why? And then you can really break apart and dive into and dissect the power of travel and tourism, the economic impact, things like that. So we're really bolstering our advocacy side of things to say, hey, yeah, these are all very, very particular stories that relate back to consumer, leisure travelers, etc. But there's also that business side, that meetings and convention side, that advocacy side. And it's just it's kind of a plug and play based on what you need and what you want out of that particular story. You can get so many miles out of that same story in a lot of different facets.
Yeah. And you just have to change it depending on the audience and write it, share it, produce it from their point of view. What's in it for them?
What's in it for them? And that's I always want to I always want to make something thought provoking. I feel like you'll appreciate this. Just something that I was thinking about before I hopped on the podcast today. I'm working on a few different things right now. And one of my favorite series of all time is the Twilight Zone from the 60s.
Uh huh.
Okay. The monologues and the epilogues, the Rod Serlings of the world, right? I feel like I'm always chasing that Rod Serling epilogue to capture Phoenix, but save for the sci-fi thriller aspect. We're not trying to sell Phoenix, necessarily on that, right? But that really thought-provoking, self-reflective manner of, oh wow, I didn't think about it that way. I've never been to Phoenix. I should go check it out. You know, the Sonoran Desert, for a lot of folks is an adventure that unravels the essence of who you are as a person, but you just might
Hmm.
not know it yet.
Well, it's interesting too. Now that you mentioned that, I was at Northern Arizona University last night. They just launched a new venture startup incubator there
Okay.
with the help
Yeah.
of Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark is famous for Startup Phoenix, and he was up there last night. And it's called Venture Studios at NAU. They had a gentleman there from what was it? Catalyst Space Technologies. Goheen Lee, I believe his name
Okay.
was. And he went to Emory Riddle University down Prescott, a very famous, world
Oh yeah.
renowned, aerospace university. He became an engineer, went to work for Rockwell, I think, and had this great career going. He's still a very young man. And didn't really care that much for the large corporation scene. He had that entrepreneur startup mentality. And so he started his company there and Catalyst Space Technologies. And they build, as I understand it, these little devices that go on satellites that are already in orbit. And the problem
Okay.
that they're solving for is these satellites are encountering lots of space junk that are messing with them.
Yeah.
And they're able to attach this thing in orbit. How they do it, I don't exactly know, to help detect the space junk and steer around it. Well, his company is going gangbusters. It is in Flagstaff. And that question came up last night. Why Flagstaff? It seems like a pretty remote place to build a space technology company. And he said it was all about the story of place.
Yeah.
He goes, if we were over in LA, Silicon Valley, Houston, whatever, we would be surrounded by numerous space technology companies and we would all be competing for the same talent. We
Right.
get top talent coming to Flagstaff that want to enjoy the place. They want to go skiing at Snowball. They want to run the Grand Canyon. They want to take in all of the advantages of the outdoor. And Gohee is very much of an outdoorsman himself, mountaineer and so forth. So
Yeah.
he uses his story of place for his B2B brand
Yeah.
to attract and retain the absolute best talent.
I love that. Yeah, and that's I mean, and that's definitely something that we're doing in Phoenix too. Flagstaff, though, yeah, to your point, you don't necessarily you're like, oh, Flagstaff, and then you're competing with LA. No, I'm gonna go to there's a very specific knowledge economy in Flagstaff that is not nearly as crowded as Los Angeles, and there he is doing that, and I mean that he'll reap all the benefits of that, and
Yeah.
I'm particularly excited for that. And that I mean that's part and parcel of Arizona becoming a tech hub too. We're really excited about that. Companies like TSMC and Intel have invested billions here. We have on the meetings and conventions side, we have secured Semicon West, which is the country's premier microelectronics conference. That's going to be in Phoenix in 25, 27, and 29, which is a really big deal. That has been traditionally held in San Francisco, which makes sense, Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It's kind of a coup, if you ask me, that it's moving here for 3 years. With the entering of TSMC, et cetera. We have the Phoenix Bioscience Core downtown with ASU. We really, really have a strong knowledge economy, and I think that permeates the whole of Arizona, our Flagstaffs, our Tucson's, our Sedonas, et cetera. I think that the curiosity of Arizona in general really helps our case for economic development, and you can never separate economic development from tourism too.
Hmm.
That's a very, very solid point.
And in my experience, people have already developed their own story of place regarding Arizona, like we talked before about all the basic, the things,
Sure.
the big Western landscapes, the
Yeah.
sunsets, the golf, the spas, and that kind of thing. But if you, and visit Phoenix, or me up here near Flagstaff working with our customers, or anyone listening to this, if you don't tell your story and make it concise, clear, compelling, authentic, then people are going to tell your story for you. And they're
It,
going to make up a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with your brand.
right. And that's where, the way that, the collective energy and the vibrance and everything that we're feeling in Phoenix right now, we're no longer waiting to be defined. When you think about that identity issue over the last couple decades, we don't have that anymore. We're no longer waiting to be defined. We're inviting the world to see this city where tourism, innovation, and ambition flourish together.
Yeah.
Unlike, it's a very one of one destination once you get here. Not like anything you've quite seen. I will say that. Coming from Michigan, I had been out here once or twice, and then I moved here, and wow, that's one of those things. Just like another simple story I think about or just even like a simple sentence or line. I was talking to my colleague about this and how we could deconstruct this and make something from it. It's a line from the Wallflower song, Jacob Dylan, One Headlight. He says, "Man, I ain't changed, but I know I ain't the same." And I feel like that is very true for a lot of folks that find themselves in the Sonoran Desert after being elsewhere for a long time.
Well, another story of place, and this is a great because it's spawning all these stories in my mind. Our son Parker and his new wife Jackie got
Yeah,
married at our home up here in Munns Park, and we're about 17 miles south of Flagstaff. And they live in Austin now, so their invite list, we had about 120 people here, came from Austin, Texas, Hollywood, SoCal area, and
yeah,
Seattle for the most part. Now, a lot of those people from California and Austin had never been to Arizona. And they saw this wedding invite that said August 8th in Arizona. Are you kidding? And one guy even said to Parker, what is this, like
right,
a dune theme? It's going to be 150
right,
degrees out there. Is this
yeah,
going to be indoors, outdoors, whatever? And Parker goes,
yeah,
no, dude, it's up in the mountains. What do you mean in the mountains? Isn't it in the desert? No, northern Arizona. We're going to be at 6,600 feet in the largest contiguous pine forest in the world. I'm sure he didn't say that. I'm just throwing that out there now. And when
right,
people showed up, they were absolutely blown away because they had a story in their mind of what they were going to experience in the hot, dusty desert in the
right.
middle of summer. And they had no idea how much this looks like Colorado in its own right up here.
Exactly. Right. And I think that is something that works in our favor, especially in Munns Park, in Flagstaff, even in Phoenix. When somebody has a very long held and strong perception or belief about a place and then they get there and it just starts to fall apart, it shows that the story in the storytelling of place, emotional resonance is such an anchor, and it's what really really matters. We've always heard the mantra, it's people are not going to remember what you said, but how they made you feel, right? Place
Mm-hmm.
is the same thing. It's how it made you feel. And when you come from a place that is not maybe a Flagstaff or not a Phoenix or not a Munns Park, but you've had long held perceptions, and then you get there and they just kind of, you know, fall off your back, you know, it completely shifts everything,
Yeah.
you know.
You get
And you
that
saw that
surprise.
firsthand with those wedding guests.
Oh yeah, yeah. It surprised them, and then it became novel to them. My sister
Right.
from Seattle came down for it, and she had been to Flagstaff once before, so she kind of knew, what the terrain was. Flew in, and she said when she first got here to Munns Park, she's like, "Oh my goodness, Park and Michelle live here full time. What do they do? How do they not go bonkers?" Well, and then in the 2.5 days she was here, of course, they, went and did some bar hopping up in
Yeah.
Flagstaff. They, played golf on our golf course. They were going to take a trip up to the Grand Canyon. And that's when she said, whoa, I was thinking there was nothing to do here. And there is an unbelievable amount of stuff to do here. Again, that anti-story being overcome by the experience of a place-based
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that I noticed shortly into my time here in Phoenix as a resident. I moved in January of 2020. I moved at a very specific time, as mentioned, right before COVID. We were very lucky to. I was very lucky, as is I think all Arizonans were, to experience COVID where we lived because we could get outside. That was not
Hmm.
the case for a lot of the country, right? And I just noticed that everything was worth looking at, and not to knock my hometown or say that that's not the case in Michigan or Detroit. I mean, if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you. Michigan's one of the most beautiful places on earth. But I think the general radiance and the 300 days of sun a year, you want to stop and let's take a right here, let's take a left there, let's keep going. Hey, let's go back a little bit. What was that? You're always looking at something here,
Yeah.
which is just it just takes you, you know.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. You came out, you went to work for Banner Health, and
Yeah.
then, of course, you were caught up in the COVID era. So you had a whole ton of work, and you were working with our good friend Jennifer Russo, who
Yes.
I have known for a long, long time. And she was the one that initially brought me in to work
Yeah.
with you all at Banner. That was pre COVID. Taught you some storytelling techniques, especially the and but therefore. You were already a very solid storyteller. But apparently you like that training so much that you brought me in, and thank you
Yeah,
again for referring me in to
of
visit
course.
Phoenix. What is it that already, good storytellers can learn from this process and this training? And your team seems like they're really exceptional storytellers already at Visit Phoenix. Why did you need to have more training for them?
Well, I think that, and I appreciate that. We have an incredible and an invaluable team of storytellers, and we do very different things, team to team, but we all do it for the greater good, for that one singular piece to push Phoenix to the rest of the world and get people to come check us out. Right. I think that we live in a fast-paced world of tourism, sales, etc. They're all communications, you name it. They're all fast-paced. We don't take a moment to slow down. We want to have more time, whether it's 5 more seconds, 10 more seconds, 15 more minutes, an hour, to really get in what we feel. Again, that emotional resonance. Sometimes it's hard to be concise. I know that personally. I have a little sticky note on my monitor at work that just says less fluff, because I love storytelling, but I know that, hey, you're muddling things, and I think that the core of the ABT framework. I think that if you just really take things down to its true deconstructed form, simplicity is the best thing you can do with the story. Whether it's media relations, whether it's comms, whether it's our sales team, etc. And I think that you can always make something more simple and as impactful. And I think that that's something, when we're so busy and we're going, that we forget about that. That if you just take some time to really hone in on what is our A, B, and C of the story, or our A, B, and T here in
Hmm.
this case,
There you go.
um, you can make something as compelling as it was in its previous form after the fact with that, if not more compelling. Simplicity allows space for connection. It leaves gaps for your audience to fill. It makes your stories personal. When storytelling a place or a destination like Phoenix, you want to spark that imaginative flame without overwhelming it, right? Because as soon as you lose someone, you lose someone. We all know that in this world, at least the storytelling world. You provide just enough to ignite curiosity, but you also create a sense of wonder, leaving the listener, leaving the reader, or leaving, the traveler that's, sitting at their gate waiting to come here, wanting more. I think it's the best use of the word. The tension between clarity and mystery is what keeps people, long after we talk to them about something, or long after we make a pitch for something. But it's really just that razor's edge of, clarity and ambiguity and that mystery, right? And it's just,
Hmm.
if you think it's simple, you could probably make it more simple. That's how I feel about those things, and that's I wanted to I if you can make it simple, if you think it's simple, you can make it more simple. The initial reference that I was going to use, which is would probably be lost on a lot of people. I won't get into this. It's another hobby interest of mine. Professional wrestling. Won't go into it, but that's theater, right? If you think you're going slow, go slower. That's like the secret and the key to, having a good match, essentially. So
Really?
yeah,
I have never heard that. So
yes,
if the wrestler feels like they're moving in slow motion, they said go even slower so
go
that what
slower,
the
go
audience can
slower.
just take it all in?
Right. And usually, if you're doing that, you have a certain allotment of minutes for your match. If you got 8 minutes, okay, you got to get. You might have to call an audible, and you're not going to get everything in. But if you don't rush it. If you think you're going slow, go slower,
I've
and
I've
that's
never
very
heard that.
applicable to storytelling.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I like the ABT as well, like you do,
Hmm.
because it does get you down to the core simple truth, that problem solution dynamic that you are sharing. So your audience doesn't have to work for it. They're burning 0 calories trying
Exactly.
to understand what you're talking about. So you have
Right.
their rapt attention that way. You
Hmm.
do have enough specifics in it to be able to light up the theater of the mind and let them picture it. But in the telling, you don't tell at all. You have that ambiguity and mystery to fire up their curiosity so that they become an active participant in the
Right.
story. What's in it for them? And then, of course, as you deliver the final punchline, the final aha moment, you then have included them in your story loop that has come full circle, and it now makes you know sense, meaning. There's
Right.
continuity to it, and they're like, "Yeah, I want more of that," or "I want to be more a part of that," or "I felt that. I can't wait to experience it real time."
Exactly. Right.
In Arizona or wherever you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun stuff. Well, Where can people learn more about your work and what Visit Phoenix is up to and see some of your place-based stories in action?
Check us out. It's very simple. All you got to do is type in Visit Phoenix and you will find our website. You will find our Instagram, our Facebook, our TikTok, our LinkedIn, you name it. Lest we forget YouTube also. Just type in Visit Phoenix and you'll see everything you need. We also have our Visit Phoenix app that is ready for download on iOS and Android, where you can make your own itinerary. We have hundreds of other itineraries already made for you based on what you might be looking for, whether it's museums, culture, bar crawls, cocktails, culinary experiences, you name it. But it's all there. Just got to look for Visit Phoenix. Pretty simple.
That's cool. And if anybody would like to get hold of you directly to pick your brain about place-based storytelling, how can they find you, Chris?
They can shoot me an email. I'm always open. I have been a gift and a curse. I have a very generic name. The email is easy. cmiller@visitphoenix.com. Please shoot me a message. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me a message there, just search for Chris Miller, MPA, and Visit Phoenix, and I should pop up. So.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for bringing me in to work with your team earlier this year. I loved it. And best of luck in 2025 with your storytelling.
Hey, thank you. Likewise. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this edition. Man, am I glad I'm still not stuck in that Houston traffic and we were able to enjoy that marvelous time in Austin, and the fact that I live just an hour and 90 minutes north of Phoenix, where over the past 40 years, we have had some really amazing place-based story experiences. If you're ever out this way, please look me up. I would love to track you down and have some fun here in Arizona. If I can help you and your folks excel through the stories you tell, and you know I can, please shoot me a note to park@businessofstory.com. I can provide you virtual training, in-person training, keynote presentations. I even have online courses and a wealth of resources for you to help you and yours excel through the stories you tell. Helping me excel right here at the Business of Story is Caden Howell, who helps produce and edit our show. I'd like to thank Marissa Hill for your marketing and community development, and of course, Darius Holbert for our amazing custom music. I hope you'll join us next Monday when Vivek Shankar will be here. He's a fractional content marketing strategist, and we'll explore why few companies have a handle on what their story is and how to communicate it in an audience-appropriate way. He's going to show you how you can conduct audience research by asking the right questions at the right time to help solve this issue. And until then, as you grow as a more confident, compelling, clear, concise communicator using the power of story, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.